You're listening to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. We all have leadership within us, and once we understand how to challenge perceived limitations, we're able to influence those we're leading. Josh is a leadership coach, trainer, and speaker. He's also a veteran of the United States Air Force with over 20 years of leadership experience. Are you ready to transform your leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results? Let's get ready for liftoff. It's time to go from great to greater. Here's Josh in today's episode.
Welcome to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Parnell, and once again, I'm excited to bring you another episode that will hopefully allow you to find value and benefit through the information shared today. As you know, I'm on a mission to reach people and build leaders, and so without you, this podcast can't grow. So I want to thank you for being here once again and ask that you would share this with your friends and family members, especially if this particular episode resonates with you, and I hope that it will, because today we're going to be talking about something that all of us have encountered on a daily basis, but quite often a regular basis, and that is how to break free from the limitations that are on ourself, and whether these are limitations that we put on ourself or someone else has put on ourself. We have some limitations. At least that's the perception that we have. We have limitations. And so what I want to do is help you transform those limitations into lessons by recognizing that the perceived limitations may not actually be true. So before we get into that, I want to share with you that if you're listening to this episode closer to the air date, which is on April 10th, that's Wednesday, April 10th, I'll be hosting a live 4-hour workshop in Houston on Friday, April 12th. So if you're listening to this episode, I'd love to see you in a couple short days. Friday, April 12th. If you head on over to my website, limitlessleadership.co, you will see all of the training information there. There are still a few spots left, so I would love to see you there. Now, I want to begin this episode by sharing how a couple weeks ago, I tried to go on Facebook Live, hence the word try. I tried to go on Facebook Live and planned an event to go on Facebook Live at a particular time, a particular day, let everyone know about it. And when that day and time came, I was not able to get on Facebook Live. Now, I don't think this was Facebook's fault. I really think it was operator error. This was something that I had assumed that when I got onto Facebook and was able to go live, it was going to be a pretty easy kind of flip of the switch type of thing. And instead, there were what I felt like to be a few hoops I had to jump through. And so I was learning on the fly in the middle of trying to go live while there was an audience who was waiting for the event. I was trying to figure out, hey, how can I make this work? And so I had to pivot. Live during the event. And I'll tell you, this was an epiphany for me, because what I realized was that the old me would have been a little flustered. I would have gotten discombobulated, if you will, and really it would have given me some stress and anxiety. And what I've learned is that I've been able to manage stress and anxiety over the years through what I call the 3 Ps, where I implement the 3 Ps. And for a lot of us, emotional regulation is something that we struggle with. In fact, I think that emotional regulation is one of the greatest skills that any of us can possess. We know that when emotions are high, logic is low. And so when we have high emotion, how are we regulating that emotion? How are we making logical decisions, remaining in a healthy state of mind? And one of the ways that I do this is implementing the 3 Ps, which is when I pause, I process, and then I pivot. When I'm pausing, I'm able to physically remove myself from the situation if the situation allows for me to. So I will remove myself from the situation. I will literally just, okay, take a breath. Pause, Josh. Think about what's going on. Start processing what's going on. Start asking questions about how I can shift my perspective from what I'm thinking to what's actually occurring. And this allows me to pause and then process. When I start processing, I'm doing just that. I'm processing the situation. I'm challenging the thoughts that I'm having, which gives me a new perspective. And with perspective, the way that we view things drives the way that we do things. So when I can start viewing things differently, I can subsequently start doing things differently. And when I get a new perspective through processing, I can then pivot accordingly. And so that's exactly what happened. So on that day and time, during the Facebook Live event, we pivoted accordingly. I paused, I processed, and then pivoted, and eventually was able to get on to that event and was able to host a very well-received event just a few weeks ago. And so what happens, though, is we find ourselves in these situations when things don't go according to plan. And I think we've all heard the phrase that, if you want to make God laugh, just tell him what your plans are. And quite often, he gets a good chuckle about what our plans are, and we're kind of forced to get comfortable being uncomfortable. We're getting out of this comfort zone of ours, and we know that growth and comfort can't coexist. So when we get in this place of discomfort, we're forced to find our way, even though it may not be the way that we planned. And for a lot of us, we can start having this paralysis by analysis type of moment where we just get paralyzed through all of the ever-evolving and ever-changing things happening in our day-to-day life. And so what are we doing? What are we doing to make sure that we're able to stay in a healthy state of mind? Today's episode is about labels that can turn into limitations, or they can turn into lessons. And I'll begin by sharing a story with you that, when I was in high school, I had plans, we're talking about plans again, had plans to go to college after high school. And my parents knew about what my plans were, and so they supported my plans about going to college. And I remember my dad telling me, "Hey, Josh, we obviously are supportive of you, and we want you to do what you are wanting to do. And if going to college is what you want to do, you need to make school a priority. You need to take your grades seriously, and make your grades something that is coming before your friends and your hobbies and so forth and so on. Make your grades a priority." And so I heard my parents, and I remember walking across the stage at my high school graduation, and I walked across the stage, got my diploma in hand. I graduated 28th in my high school class out of 30 people. I said I heard my parents. I didn't say I listened to my parents. All right, so I graduated 28 out of 30. It was in that moment that I began to put a label on myself that took me years to be able to shed. And that label was that I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't capable. I wasn't competent. And because of that, I wasn't confident either. I lacked a lot of confidence. I did not believe in myself. I simply did not believe in myself. Any room that I was in beyond that high school experience, I remember thinking to myself, there could be 100 people in the room, and I felt like I was the least smartest person in the entire room. And that was something that I carried for a long time. It was a particular label that I did not know how to shed for a long time. And so what happened is when I put a label on myself, I was putting a limitation around myself. So imagine if you're watching this episode on YouTube, you can see me motioning a box. So I put a label on myself, and I put essentially a limitation around myself that was a box that I could not break out of, I couldn't break free from. And there's a poet by the name of NQ, and he has a line that I absolutely love, and he says, "Defining myself is like confining myself. So I undefined myself to find myself." So if I'm breaking down this quote, defining myself, or in other words, putting a label on myself, is like confining myself, or in other words, putting a limitation on myself. So I undefined myself to find myself. How do we break free from the limitations that are put on us from the labels that we have? How do we turn those limitations into lessons? For me, it wasn't until I joined the Air Force shortly after high school. I went to college for a year and a half. Again, had plans to go to college. I planned on being there for 4 years, but after a year and a half, the college I was going to said, "Hey, Josh, thanks for playing, but your grades are terrible. You need to leave." I still wasn't making grades a priority. I still was believing the thoughts that I have, and one of the greatest mistakes all of us can make is assuming any of our thoughts are true. I was believing that I could not achieve X, Y, or Z. So there was not a level of belief that allowed me to break free from the limitations that were surrounding me. So I joined the Air Force and met a lot of incredible peers and mentors. Really was able to surround myself with people who allowed me to really just shift a paradigm and reshape my perspective on a lot of things. I learned back then that there are two things that we can control each and every day, and that's our attitude and our effort. It's our attitude and our effort. So I'm not saying that choosing positivity is an easy thing. In fact, even though we can control our attitude, I don't want you to hear me say this is super easy to do. Just do it. It's not, but it takes practice. It takes emotional regulation. Remember, when emotion is high, logic is low. We can implement the 3 Ps. We can learn how to remain in a logical, healthy state of mind when we exercise emotional regulation. We know that not every day is going to be a good day, but we can find the good in every day. And so even on those very tough and trying and challenging days, some of those tragic days, think about a day in your life when someone close to you passed away. This person is no longer in your life for the rest of your life. Believe it or not, we can still choose to have a positive attitude on that day. It's certainly not easy, but this is where we can lean on our friends, lean on our family. One of a favorite quote of mine from Maya Angelou, she says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget the way you made them feel. And you think back to that time at the funeral or the wake, or whenever you lost that loved one, you think about that season in your life, and you likely don't remember all the things that were said during that time frame. You likely don't remember all the things that were done during that time frame. Like, you probably don't even remember the eulogy, but you do remember who showed up. You remember who showed up for you, and those people showed up for you in a way that's a feeling you're never going to forget. People will never forget the way you made them feel. So we can choose positivity, we can choose our attitude, and we can always provide maximum effort. Notice I'm not saying 100%, I'm saying maximum effort. Maximum effort means giving your best each and every day. And sometimes your best may not be your very best. What I mean by this is those days that, let's say, we're sick or we're injured or something's going on where we're just not quite able to give 100%, but we can give 80, and so we give 80. We can give 90, and so we give 90. On the days that we can give 100 and we give 90, we're not providing maximum effort. The two things we can control each and every day is our attitude and our effort. So going back to the labels, I want to share this. Our labels may define our past, but our past doesn't define us. For years, I carried this label because of something that occurred in my past. So when I surrounded myself with incredible peers and mentors to help me shift a perspective and recognize that these limitations that I had from the labels, they actually weren't limitations. These were lessons that I was in the process of learning and growing from. There's a reason that our windshield is bigger than our rearview mirror. So recognize that your past is truly in the past. Starting today, we can look forward and turn those limitations into lessons. But ask yourself, before we do this, what labels are you currently carrying? What labels are you currently carrying from your past? That's not allowing you to break free from the limitations around you. Remember, defining myself is like confining myself, so I undefined myself to find myself. So today I want to help you undefine yourself if this is a struggle that you're currently dealing with. So we talked about attitude and effort. I want to then dive into faith and fear. For most of us, the biggest struggle that we're facing, at the root of that struggle, is fear. And fear is simply false evidence appearing real. And we're always going to find evidence in the things that we believe. Keep in mind, back when I graduated 28th out of 30, I found evidence that backed up my belief that I wasn't smart. I found evidence that supported my belief. And when I say that we're always going to find evidence in the things that we believe, we can shift that around as well. We can find evidence that says, you know what, Josh, no, that's not true. The reality is you didn't apply yourself. You didn't take responsibility. You didn't ask enough questions. You didn't listen. I said I heard my parents. I didn't say I listened to my parents. I also didn't listen to my teachers, I'm sure. And if my teachers are listening, they might be able to confirm that for you as well. But let's talk about faith and fear, because the reality is the similarity between faith and fear is that they both believe in a future that hasn't happened yet. So why wouldn't we choose faith. The freedom is truly on the other side of our fears. So let's learn how we can reshape our perspective, how we can start challenging our thoughts, because we know that our thoughts will dictate our feelings, and our feelings will dictate our actions, and our actions will dictate our legacy. So if we want to change our legacy, it begins with our thoughts. So how do we begin to do this? How do we start challenging our thoughts and turn those limitations into lessons? Number one, we take responsibility. We take responsibility. We have to be able to take responsibility for our actions. It's very easy for us to find fault or blame or put blame on something or someone else. Take responsibility. It is time to own up to our actions and hold ourselves accountable. The greatest accountability partner is ourself. Going back to another high school story, I was a freshman in high school, and I don't remember exactly what was happening, but the class that I was in, there was a short break, and it got loud. People were just kind of cutting up, and I was at the center of it all. And I remember the teacher coming in, Miss Mitchell. Miss Mitchell came in, and she called me out. Immediately, I started pointing at my friend, and I'm not going to call him out because he's probably listening to this. I pointed at my friend and said, but he, and she cut me off. She said, you always do that. You always point out what he did or what she did. What about you? And I remember that. I was 14 years old, just young, naive, and was not in a place at the time where I really realized what accountability was. And she helped me look inside myself and really begin to realize, hey, take ownership of who you are and what you're doing. Take ownership of your actions. No one else is responsible for the actions that you take or the reactions that you provide. You need to take responsibility. That's what I was telling myself. And so now, again, I'm not saying that was easy. I mean, that was years ago. I know I've gotten significantly better at that since then. And but I'm still always trying to find opportunities to hold myself accountable. As a lot of you may know, I see a counselor once a month. I work with my coach twice a month, and I'm married to a licensed professional counselor. So I get free counseling even when I don't want it, but I know I need it. I know that there are blind spots that I have that I need people who I trust to speak truth into my life. And so going back to the steps that we can take to turn the labels into the limitations into lessons. Number one, take responsibility. I'm going to give you 5 today. Number 1 is take responsibility. Number 2 is to ask questions. Ask questions. Seek first to understand, then be understood. When I ask questions, I'm able to begin to learn really what's going on around me and start processing what's going on around me. Now, when we ask questions, make sure that we're listening to the responses that we're getting. There is a difference between hearing something or hearing someone and listening to someone. If we're hearing someone, we're simply waiting for them to stop talking so we can tell them what we want to say. If I'm listening, I'm receiving information, I'm processing information, and I'm utilizing that information to best serve that person. So I need to make sure that I'm asking questions and truly listening to each and every response before I move on to the next question I'm going to ask as well. Number 3, stop the negative self-talk. When we verbalize things, our brain is going to receive that, and we're going to start believing that. We're going to start acting in accordance with that. Do not speak negatively to yourself. Do not speak negatively to yourself. So be kind to yourself. Only speak affirmations, positive affirmations. Stop the negative self-talk. And ask your peers around you to help you stop the negative self-talk. In order to hold yourself accountable on this, we may be doing this so often we don't even realize it. So share with someone who you trust, who you feel safe with, who would be willing to speak truth into you and say, look, hey, I want to make sure that I'm not speaking down to myself or speaking negatively about myself. If or when you hear me say anything, please call me out on it. Number 4, practice gratitude. Practice gratitude. The third quote I'm going to share with you today is from Oprah Winfrey. She says, be thankful for what you have. You'll end up having more. If you concentrate on what you don't have, you will never, ever have enough. Practice gratitude. Be able to count your blessings. It's so easy for us to recognize the negative things happening around us. We identify all of the quote unquote losses in our life, but are we counting our blessings? Are we counting and stacking our wins? What gets celebrated gets repeated. So let's start practicing gratitude. One of the practices my wife and I started a couple years ago is a gratitude practice where every day we will each share with each other 3 things that we're grateful for. And some of these days we're sharing the same thing, and that's perfectly okay. If there is something that we're grateful for at the top of our mind that day, hey, let's verbalize it. Let's express it to each other. Let's share it with someone. We're sharing it with each other so that we can remember all the wins that are in our life, all the things that God has continued to bless us with over and over again, because it's so often and so easy for us to look at the things around us and really just unintentionally take things for granted. And so practice gratitude. Whatever your gratitude practice looks like, do it. Practice it. Do it regularly. In fact, I would love to know what your gratitude practice is. So if you would, shoot me an email, josh@thebeardedleader.com. That's josh@thebeardedleader.com. Let me know what your gratitude practice is, because I would love to be able to collect these pieces of information and share them with my network as well. If anyone is looking to practice gratitude, but they don't know what that really looks like, I shared one example of how my wife and I do it, but there are plenty of gratitude practices you can do. In fact, one of them actually kind of segues into our 5th and final step on how we can transition limitations into lessons, and that is to journal. Journaling is a form of gratitude practice, but the way I'm describing journaling here today is how for a lot of us, studies will show that humans have up to 60,000 thoughts per day, and 80% of our thoughts are negative, and 90% of our thoughts are repetitive. And so we really struggle with managing our thoughts for obvious reasons. I mean, if we're having 60,000 thoughts per day, and most of them are negative, and most of them are repetitive, you can understand why stress and anxiety and worry and doubt and concern and fear are as high as they are these days. Especially after the pandemic, I saw studies show that anxiety increased 300% since the pandemic. So we're regularly having to try to figure things out if we don't really know practical steps to take to figure things out on our own. One of them is journaling. When we begin to journal, what happens is we start getting clarity and direction through simply writing out our thoughts. And even when I'm coaching folks, I mean, and when I'm being coached, I told you I have my own coach as well. But through the coaching practice, it's a one-on-one coaching practice. It's very much like verbal journaling. We are verbally processing things. We're sharing our thoughts. We're sharing ideas, opinions, and what happens is we begin to write things down, and then we start asking questions based on what we're writing down, and we answer those questions. And then we ask questions based on those answers. And then we answer those questions. And it's this recurring process that eventually you look up and you realize, hey, I have more clarity and direction based on the fact that I just simply wrote these things down. The things that we write are the things that we invite. And this is a proven fact because we have a 42% more likely chance of achieving our goals simply by writing out our thoughts. So when we start writing things out, whether it's our thoughts, whether it's our goals, whether it's our ideas that we have a 42% more likely chance of achieving them just by putting them on paper. And journaling is very similar to solving a math equation. So if you think back to your school days, for a lot of us, we haven't really done that school type math in our adult life, like our teachers may have said we would. But that's another topic for another day. But anyway, going back to the math equation. So you think back to your school days, and if I was going to say, okay, I need you to give me the answer to 347 times 565. Most of us can't do this in our head. I mean, some of you may be able to, and if you can, hey, mad props to you. That's amazing. Most of us can't do it in our head. And so you say, hey, that's fine. I can do that equation. What I say, 347 times 565. Can I use a calculator? Nope, can't use a calculator. Okay, well then what if I use a pen and paper? So again, go back to your school days and you're writing out 347 times 565. And you start writing this equation out, and then you start solving your work. Like you start trying to solve the equation by showing your work, rather. That's what I meant to say, showing your work. And so you're doing the math equation and you're trying to think back, okay, how do I do this math equation? Okay, you carry the 1 here, and then I get this number, and okay, it looks like this is the answer. So I literally was able to show my work, and then I get the answer because I worked things out on paper. And journaling is very similar to that. We can't expect to figure things out in our head like a complex math equation, because we have 60,000 other thoughts already happening in there. So when we take that thought that is really challenging us and holding us, limiting us rather, write it down, ask a question, answer the question, ask a question based on the answer the question, and keep on going. That's really how journaling can start. I mean, we can have an entire episode on journaling one day, and I think we probably will, but the most important thing is I want to put this on your radar. I want to put journaling on your radar. Both my counselor years ago and my coach have both shared with me how important journaling is, and it wasn't until a couple years ago where I started really heeding their advice and actually making journaling a regular practice of mine. But the 2 things that every person needs in any relationship, especially professionally, is clarity and direction. And I get clarity and direction through journaling. So we're going to revisit the 5 steps. How are we transforming those limitations from the labels into lessons that we can learn and grow from? Number 1, take responsibility. Number 2, ask questions. Number 3, stop the negative self-talk. Number 4, practice gratitude. And number 5, journal. Number 5, journal. Ultimately, we want to challenge ourselves to think differently. So as we sign off, I can't help but feel compelled to share 2 things with you that I think is very important. Number 1, take action. Take action. These are the 2 words that we often need to be reminded of in order to make progress. For a lot of us, we keep waiting for to be prepared. We're waiting to be ready. We're waiting for the right time. I'm telling you that the right time is right now. If you've been putting something off that you need to do, and that could be a project, that could be reaching out to a loved one, take action. Today is the day. Today is the day to take action. What you'll find is that when you take action, motivation and confidence tend to follow. So don't wait to get motivated. Don't wait until you're ready. Don't wait until you're prepared. Don't wait until you're fill in the blank. The time is right now. Take action. Motivation and confidence is going to follow. And lastly, the last thing I want to share with you is 4 important words that I need you to hear, and that is, I believe in you. So if you're listening to this, I truly, genuinely believe in you. Thank you everyone for listening to another episode. Each and every episode, we look to transform our leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great day. Don't forget to smile today. Tell your loved ones how much they mean to you. I'm Josh Parnell, reminding you to keep leading well.